There's a lot of people out there that talk about building a personal brand to get opportunities, either job opportunities or maybe clients or things like that. But it's harder than it looks. I've spent a lot of time posting on LinkedIn myself and worked with a lot of people. And even though the gurus might tell you it's super easy and you just post a lot of content, you really need to be posting the right kind of content that actually connects with people that people want to see. And so I'm super excited to have my friend Angela Snyder on to talk about building a personal brand because she's done an amazing job building a personal brand through telling stories and posting content that really does get people's attention and builds great relationships with people. And she's used that to transition from teaching into the marketing world and really make a massive career transition. And so, Angela, super excited to have you on to share your experience today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about all things personal branding.
Yeah, let's dig in. Yeah, so I don't want you to give like your whole life story, but you were a teacher, so I'd love to hear about kind of what led you to go, "Hey, I'm thinking about making a shift in my career."
Yeah, that is the question I get a lot. So I was an elementary teacher for 8 years, and it was back in 2022, post COVID. And I just wasn't happy anymore. I realized, the profession had changed a bit during that time. The world had changed, right? Kids had changed. And my heart just wasn't in it anymore. I realized what's really important to me. I want to spend more time with family. I want flexibility. I want to be respected. And so I started thinking, like, am I stuck here? What else can I do? And I had heard, just kind of through the grapevine that people got job offers through LinkedIn. People got reached
Mm.
out to by recruiters. I know it happened with my sister a lot. She's an actuary. And so I had heard of other people, who were in jobs and then were able to get new ones from LinkedIn. And I'm like, well, how hard can it be? Maybe I can do it. And so I just logged in one day, not knowing at all what I was doing, but just kind of hoping for the best. And it was just kind of on a whim.
Love it. Yeah, and I there's a couple things I want to dig into from what you just shared. So the first thing is I I've started talking about this a bit because I've made some pretty big career transitions over the years, and a lot of it has revolved around LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn has been a huge catalyst for me to
Yep.
first of all actually get into marketing. I was working a lot of blue collar jobs and outside in the sun all day, every day, working super hard, and I knew, man, I'm just not really built to do that
Mm.
for the rest of my life. And LinkedIn played a huge part in my story. And then I've also landed multiple jobs that really moved my career forward through LinkedIn. So I'm also like a very huge proponent of the value that LinkedIn can bring for your career. But I also have been using this analogy. So people who have heard me talk a lot have probably already heard this, but so many people take the default train in life where they're just hop on whatever train is in front of them, or maybe you decided to hop on the train to be a teacher, and then a lot of people will just continue riding that train, even if they're miserable, even if they've really come to this realization, just because they have a mindset that, well, I can't change. It's too late, or it's too hard, or people won't take me seriously, or whatever. So I just want to say, first of all, amazing job actually making that choice to go, hey, I want to see something change in my life, and then you know choosing to figure out a way to get off that train. So first of all, kudos to you on that. But I'd love to hear more about what you started doing initially on LinkedIn. So you're like totally fresh, you're getting ready to jump on and go, I guess I'll just try this thing out. What did you do?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I agree. It is hard to jump off a high speed train, right? It's scary. You don't want to get hurt. You don't want to be lost, but you got to do what you got to do. So what happened? It was January, actually, 2022, and so our holiday break, Christmas break, winter break, whatever you want to call it, was coming to an end. And I had gotten COVID for the first time. I got COVID New Year's Eve of 2021, I guess. And so at the time you weren't able to go back into the school for like 10 days or something like that. And I was actually, you know, this is going to sound strange. I was happy to have had COVID at that time because I was dreading going back to school. I was like,
Mm.
no, I just had this like ache in my chest. And I knew like, this isn't good. I've always loved teaching. I wanted to be a teacher since I was like 5 years old. playing school in the basement with my dad and sister. I taught all different grades. I moved abroad and taught, started a school over there. And I was like, now I don't love it. My heart isn't in it anymore. So since I
Mhm.
was stuck at home anyway, and I was sick, I was like, let me get on LinkedIn and see what I can do here. Let me see what it's all about. Maybe it won't work. Maybe it will. So I logged in, and I think I had like 100 or like 150 connections. My profile was so out of date. Teachers, as I'm sure you know, don't really use LinkedIn. So my profile had not been touched since I created it. And I was like, all right, you know what? This is a little overwhelming. So I'm going to just start small and work on my profile. So I spent some time optimizing my profile, doing a lot of, research, Googling, like, what should I do with my LinkedIn profile, and just kind of piecing it together, and just started scrolling and reading content. That's kind of how it started. And then as time went on, I felt more and more comfortable, started engaging more, started sending connection requests. And at that time, it was primarily to people that I really knew. I was like, okay, who can I connect with? I'm thinking about neighbors,
Yep.
college professors, old classmates, my cousins. Like, who do I know that will definitely accept me? Because I didn't know that on LinkedIn. I didn't know anything, right? So
Yeah.
I'm like, what can I control? What do I know? And so I just started small with people that I knew, and just like, how can I write about myself on my profile? So that was kind of step one.
Awesome. Yeah. So you're getting in, kind of figuring it out, looking at the lay of the land, updating your profile. And at that point, were you thinking just like, hey, this is basically like a glorified resume? Was that kind of how you were viewing that? Or did you have the idea that like I actually need to start posting content on here?
So initially, no. Initially, I never thought, like, back, when I was sick in January of 2022, it was never like, I'm going to go to LinkedIn and I'm going to write content and, I'm going to get people to connect with me. Like, I didn't even know any of that stuff. When I thought about LinkedIn, again, as a teacher who never really used the platform, and I think a lot of people think of LinkedIn as this like stuffy, uppity profile where it's just like a bunch of men in like suits, like swapping resumes, and it's super boring. And that's what I thought. And I was like, I'm just going to show up and like see if any of these people, maybe want to talk to me, maybe they're interested in my background. And I'm just going to kind of scroll and, yeah, just kind of see what's out there. I really just thought I would. The thing is, I didn't really think too far ahead. I kind of was like, I need to start somewhere. So I'm going to log in. I'm going to learn what I need to learn. I'm going to build this profile, and we'll see what happens. Like, I'm going to just take each day as it comes. I didn't have like a 6-month plan. I didn't even know that there were followings. I didn't know you could follow people. I knew about connections. And so I just kind of got on. And again, it's overwhelming when you've never been on the platform before. You don't know anything about how it works. So I
Yeah.
just started learning. I just took my time off and was reading, and like making all these updates to my profile. And then as I would click on other people's profiles, I got different ideas. And then it actually just so happened that about a month and a half later, it was sometime like mid or end of February, I had a phone call with an aunt of mine, and it really, like, I left that call very upset and angry. I had a lot to say because she was saying some things I did not agree with about teachers and the teaching profession. And
Mhm.
so I just had like a light in me, a fire in me, I guess you could say. And I came to LinkedIn and I posted my very first post. Actually, this one was a bit earlier. It might have been early February. And I just like went on a rant. I got on a soapbox and I posted this whole thing about teaching. And I was amazed at how many people it resonated with and how many
Yeah.
likes and comments I got. And that was kind of a sign, I guess. I took that as like, okay, like people care about what I have to say here, and I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah, I mean, and you've had some incredible success. You're at almost 50,000 followers on LinkedIn, and you've had some posts that have done insanely well. So, looking back even to the early days and some of the things that you've worked on since then, what do you think it is that that, because there's a lot of people who post on LinkedIn every day, and for most people, their first post that they post doesn't doesn't do very well, right? It's like
Right.
usually when you're coaching, so when I'm talking to somebody on LinkedIn, it's like, yeah, I mean, the good thing is that probably nobody's going to see your first post anyway. So like, just post, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then, you've had a lot of success from the very beginning. So what do you think you've done differently, or what do you think what do you think it is about your content that has really resonated with people?
Yeah, great question. I think it all comes down to storytelling and being yourself and being vulnerable. I think on LinkedIn, especially now when I'm scrolling through my feed, I see so much content and so much of it looks the same. And it's like formatted the same and it's saying the same things. It's like, 10 tips about this, or 5 reasons why, AI sucks, or 5 reasons why AI is great.
Yeah.
And there's so many like tips and tricks and people that have founded their own companies and they're making 6 7 figures and all these crazy success stories, and it's really hard for most people to relate to. And so I try to remind people, like, first off, LinkedIn is a highlight reel. So for all of these wonderful things you see happening and all these wonderful announcements and achievements, there's a whole lot that they're not sharing, right? A lot of failures, a lot of learnings, a lot of things that didn't go right. So you can't compare like the struggle you're going through now to someone else's, like, I made it.
And a
So
lot of exaggeration potentially too, depending. Like some people
yes,
are that way, but there's also a lot of exaggeration, or people are like, oh yeah, I just closed this massive deal, and they think they did and it felt good, but they didn't close it yet, but they'll talk
yeah,
about it like they did. Like lots of stuff like that definitely
yes.
happens.
No, that's a great point. There's a lot of exaggeration, and there is also some straight up lying and stealing, which I come across. People who copy and paste other people's content and take credit for it. And that's unfortunate. So you got to keep that in mind too. It could be the truth, it could not be the truth, but regardless, these people, everyone's struggling. So I think mindset is a big piece of it when you're spending time on LinkedIn. But for me, I got on LinkedIn and, I was a teacher trying to transition. I didn't have any like wonderful sales achievements or marketing achievements or tips about, whatever. I didn't have my own 7 figure company. So what I did was I shared stories. I shared what I was going through. I shared about
Mm.
teaching. I shared about, teachers and how they should be respected and well paid and better understood. And no one will ever work as hard as a teacher. And I'm saying that now as, I've done marketing for the past 3 years. It doesn't matter what I do in the future. I will never work as hard or as long as I did as a teacher. So any teachers out there, I shout out to you. You're amazing. So I think it's all about storytelling. It's about sharing, being vulnerable and sharing, life stories, struggles you're going through, things you're learning, failures, not necessarily getting on LinkedIn and complaining, right? I see that sometimes too, where people just like totally bash, recruiters or the hiring
Right.
process. We talk about, I've been doing this for so many months and nothing's working. And like, that's not good. But just getting on and sharing like life stories and anecdotes, that's what's going to resonate with a lot of people. And those are the posts of mine that tend to do the best.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because I'm not actually a very good natural storyteller. It's not in my blood. My wife is way better. Like when we're at an event and my wife starts talking and telling a story, people really they lean in, and she's just great at telling
Yeah.
stories. And when I start telling stories, although I've gotten a little better at it, but when I start telling stories, people tune out. So that's something I've really worked on and studied, because that hasn't been something that's natural to me. And recently, I was doing a class with Eva Daniel. She does speech writing and speech coaching, and she said something that really kind of switched my brain, switched my mindset on telling stories. So I've kind of thought, well, you got to tell a story that's going to be interesting. And so, what are the things about my life that stand out, that are interesting and different than what other people have done? And I do have some stories that are super different and interesting. But then what she said is, if you have a really interesting story and you have a very relatable story, go for the relatable story, because that's what people really connect with. That's what they remember. When you talk about something, even if your story is different, what's the thing in that story that everybody else is going to be like, oh yeah, or at least the group of people that you're trying to connect with are going to go, oh my gosh, like I didn't have that exact same experience, but I felt exactly the same
Yeah.
way. And I think I think you do that really well. I think that's part of why your stories really resonate, because it's not just going, hey, I did this thing and here's how it relates to B2B marketing or whatever, right? You're telling a real story, and then you're sharing about um, something that's going on internally, whether that's positive or negative. Like you're sharing some feeling that you've had related to that story. And I think that I mean, clearly it really resonates with people, but I do think that's part of why your stories do really well.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I agree. I think people want to relate to other people, right? And that's why I'm a big believer in, when you think about building your brand, because it's one thing to like want engagement on your post, you want something to go viral. I get it. But building your brand, excuse me, is like this larger concept. It's bigger than that. It's about building relationships, building trust, being credible. And like over time, you have to be consistent, and you have to like keep that. Your tone and your voice and like your content pillars, like you've got to keep that content coming so people know like they can count on you to hear about XYZ, and like they know that you're going to be honest with them, or they know that you're going to inspire them, or whatever it is that your content typically does. If people can't relate to your content, it doesn't make sense to them, they don't see themselves in it, then that's not the type of content to put out, or that's not the right audience for you. So there's lots of like parts of building a brand. You want to make sure you're talking to the right audience, you've got the right audience, you're putting out the right content. But at the end of the day, it's people want to know about the person behind the profile. So it's really important to like show that you're human and to humanize your brand instead of always just focusing on like your work achievements. That's great, but like, who are you outside of work? And I think that's what people, in my experience, that's what people like most about me and my brand. And like when I get messages, people aren't asking me, well, I get a lot of different questions, but for the most part, people aren't asking me about, my role like in B2B fintech startups. They're not interested in that. They want to know like where I traveled last, and like talk about my dog, or like how did I make the transition from teaching to marketing. So it's those things that people really want to talk about, and not so much, the 25 lessons, that going through the Starbucks drive-through, I learned that day.
Right.
It's just crazy what people come up with. So I think just being real is what people want to see.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that too a little bit, because I think one thing I've been working on and talking about for a little while here is, well, how do you build unbreakable influence? Because people talk about influence, and I think a lot of times we think influencers, right?
Mhm.
And that there's definitely a point to where being an influencer does actually give you true influence. There's certain people who have gained a lot of actual influence with people,
Yeah.
but then what ends up happening is people go, well, I want to be influential, so I have to start talking about my ideas, my point of view, my perspective, so that I can gain influence for what I know. But what I found is that the people who gain unbreakable influence, the kind that doesn't ebb and flow with the algorithm changes, or if the economy's up or it's down, or whatever, there's people that I've met who have influence in other people, like genuine unbreakable influence, where when they say something, or they put on an event, or they come out with a new product or offer, or whatever it is, they get tons of people who flock to them. Like they have actual influence. And what I believe is that influence doesn't come from your ideas, it comes from the connections that you've made with other people. And when somebody feels like you have connected with them on an emotional level in some way, you're going to have far more influence in that person's life than if you just shared an idea where they went, oh wow, that was an interesting idea, right? If you've changed their life, especially like you've eliminated some kind of suffering in their life, maybe that's even just them reading a story from you and them resonating with that and going, wow, maybe I'm stuck in a job that I hate, maybe I could do what Angela did and I could make that same transition. That's an emotional feeling that person has. Like you've given them hope at that point. And so you're going to have gained a certain level of influence with that person that goes way beyond the tactics, right? And
Mhm.
then once you've gained that influence, because you've built an actual connection with that person, then you can share the tactics and they want to hear what you have to say, because you've made that emotional connection with them. And I won't go on for too much longer about this because I love your input on it. But it's also starts with one-to-one connections. And so people, I find, want to have their ideas go viral and get tons of attention for it. But the people I found who have the most influence really connect on an individual level with people. And really, no matter how big their brand is, no matter how, and I think Gary Vee is a perfect example of this. Like anybody that I know who's met Gary Vee or been around him, he'll give very focused attention to one person and make them feel like they're the most important person in the room, even if it's just for 5 seconds or 30 seconds, and it's really powerful because then you feel like, wow, I actually have a genuine connection with this person. So anyway, I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Building connections and building trust is huge. So especially when I was starting out, I was messaging people all the time, having combos in the DMs, hopping on coffee chats, hopping on calls with tons of people. Then even now, I get people that reach out to me, especially new connections, and they want to chat. And if I have the time, I always try to do it. So during busier seasons, I can't possibly meet with everyone, but other times, if I'm looking at my calendar and I'm like, you know what, I do have 30 minutes on Friday. I do try to continue to have one-on-ones with people because it's just so important. And you learn so much too. You learn about what other people are going through. Maybe you can both help each other out. Maybe someone's offering something or looking for something and you kind of hold the key to that. Maybe someone's local. Like I've had someone reach out recently, a newer connection, and I didn't even realize we were in the same city. And so instead of doing a one-to-one, like a virtual coffee chat, we're going to actually have coffee in person, which is cool. So I
Love
think
it.
these are all ways, to just build true, connections. And then when they see you in their feed or you see them in their feed, you feel, you know them, right? You want to support them. There's just that human connection or bond there that is, so much stronger than, you can put out all the best content in the world, but people really want to get to know you and you should want to get to know them. So it's definitely all about, give and take for sure.
So then, what are some of the practical steps you have for somebody, somebody's listening and they go, hey, I'm ready to start posting on LinkedIn. I want to make a transition in my career. I want to build my personal brand.
Mhm.
What are 2 or 3 things that they could do next week to get started?
Yeah, great question. I would say the top 3 things would be first and foremost, update and optimize your profile. Because if you're putting up content and then someone goes to your profile and it's just not complete, you've got like the default gray LinkedIn banner, you don't really have anything in your headline, or maybe it just says teacher, and there's nothing there, no recommendations, no skills, that's no one's impressed by that or excited by that. It's pretty boring. So you want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward and think of your profile. It's so much more than a resume and so much more than a portfolio. It's like a living, breathing, like testament of you, and you get to make it whatever you want. And I have a whole lot of tips about how to optimize their profile and what you should do as a transitioning teacher that I won't get into right now. But think about where you want to go and build your profile around that instead of just staying in like your teacher or whatever you're doing now mindset. So make sure you optimize it, put your own headline and banner and all that good stuff. The second thing I would say is to start building your network. And I would say start with what I did, connect with all the people that you really know first. Think about neighbors, people you volunteered with, classmates, family members. Make sure you're connected with all your actual real life connections first, and then start branching out and see who your second degree connected with. Especially if there's people, if you know the field you want to transition into, start following people. And once you engage with them enough or you have enough mutual connections, send a connection request to them. and you want to get to at least 500 connections. At least that's the minimum. If you have less than 500, aim for 500. And then the third thing would be content. I wouldn't rush anyone into writing their own content unless you really have something, you feel compelled to say, then say it. I would actually recommend you get started with engaging, because the magic happens in the comments. And especially now, the algorithm changes all the time. It changed like a month or two ago and got all wonky. Seems to be leveling out a bit. But a lot of times, comments will get more impressions, more likes than content you're putting out on your own page. And especially if you're starting out and you don't have a lot of followers or connections, definitely focus on thoughtful comments and be strategic. Make sure you're commenting on people's posts, that they put out great content. They're someone you look up to. They're in a role you'd like to be in. They're in an industry that you're interested in, and start engaging there. And that's how you'll start getting noticed, and you'll get on those different creators or managers' radar.
I love that. Yeah, that's really, really good advice. When you're going to connect with people, if you're just starting out and you're connecting, when I started in 2018, there weren't really the connection limits, so I was able to go connect with like an insane amount of people really quickly. But now you really want to shoot for like 15 to 20 a day, and if you're going over that, especially if you haven't been active on LinkedIn at all, you could get flagged. So don't go connect with like 500 people in one day. Shoot for like 15 to 20 a day for, and then it'll take you a couple weeks to get up to that, because you don't want to. It would be really sad to decide you're finally going to get active on LinkedIn and then be in LinkedIn jail for a week or two.
Yes.
That would be depressing. But yeah, that's super solid advice on the commenting too, right? Because if you comment on somebody else's stuff, they're trying to get engagement. They're trying to do something. So especially if it's somebody you want to build a relationship with, comment on their stuff and, actually read it, say something meaningful, not just like, hey, nice post, and say something meaningful. And then if they comment back, then my recommendation would be go to the DMs from there. And I found that people are not everybody, but many of people on LinkedIn are very generous if you just are open. So like if you're a teacher and you want to transition, or, really if you're at any transition season, just be honest with people. And so if they engage with you, reach out to them in the DMs and go, man, I've really enjoyed our conversation here. I'm actually trying to transition out of teaching into marketing. Would you be open to hopping on a 15-minute call with me and giving me some pointers of what I could do to make this transition? And then some people will ignore you. Some people will be like, nah, I don't have time for that, right? But you're going to find people who will be like, oh my gosh, yeah, I would love to help you. Then they'll hop on a call. And that to me is where you really get into that accelerates the speed that you can make those transitions. Because if you're just putting your resume out there, very difficult to get a job doing that, especially if you're making a career change. But if you meet the hiring manager and you had a conversation with them on LinkedIn, or you meet somebody who's influential and they make a warm intro to a hiring manager at a company that you want to work at, that's going to go 10 times further than just like blanket submitting your resume everywhere. Because my resume and my background until the last few jobs I've had was very different and very weird. So it took way more intentionality for me to get those early roles than just like putting my resume out there. So yeah, I love that advice. So what I was going to ask you a slightly different question here, but I think you pretty much answered it through the rest of the things you said. So what I'd love to finish on is, there's somebody out there and they're miserable in their job and they're going, hey, I'm stuck, right? There's no way that I could do what Angela did. Maybe, they're like, hey, I'm 45 and I want to be making this transition and I'm too old and nobody's going to take me seriously. Or, they've got all this head trash. What advice do you have for somebody who wants to make a change in their life, but they feel like it's too late or it's not possible?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So first I would say, like, empty the head trash. I mentioned this in the beginning of our conversation. Mindset is so important, because like another thing to consider is when someone's job searching and they've been actively applying and they're really hustling and they're not getting anywhere, but then they keep seeing people in their feed saying, I landed a new job. I've got my new job. I'm starting a new role. That can be defeating for people too. And it's like, oh, how come everyone else is getting a job and not me? You can't think that way, right? It's all about mindset. You have to be positive. And this is just like my life, like mantra. Like, if you don't believe in yourself, then like no one else is going to. And so while we all tend to be our own biggest critic, we really need to shift and become our own biggest cheerleader. And you'll never know if you can or can't do it unless you try. So that was my mindset going into LinkedIn. I'm like, it might work, it might not work, but I'm going to go and I'm going to learn and I'm going to try my best. And I would say, if I can do it, anyone can do it. It's not like I had any, I was a teacher. I didn't have any big followings on any other social media platform. I will say I've always been a writer. I've always enjoyed writing. And I know that's not the case for everybody. So I would say when you're getting overwhelmed, focus on what you can control. So focus on your mindset, get the mindset right, and then just come up with like 1 or 2 things you can do each day or like a checklist for the week, and just start small and check those off. And then as you get more comfortable, you can start doing more. But you'll notice, I was just talking to someone yesterday who just started getting active in June. We had a coaching call because he wanted to get a bit more intentional about building his personal brand and being seen as a thought leader. And he's like, I started posting twice a week in June and I've already seen incredible results, all these metrics. I've doubled, my connections, blah, blah, blah. And so he wanted to keep going. So I say, give it a few months, right? Do what you can, focus on what you can control, and then look at, how far you grow in that time. And then I'm sure you'll be inspired to keep going. And like you said, the people here are so supportive. People want to help. So I'm sure if you start building those relationships, you start talking to people, you'll realize, we're all kind of in this together. Everyone wants to support you. People will be happy to refer you or introduce you to someone if you put yourself out there. So again, mindset, believe in yourself so other people believe in you, and just start small and you can always, scale from there.
Yeah. And I'll add one thing onto that, because I find that a lot of people who aren't used to posting get afraid that they're going to like get a troll or they're going to say something and people are going to be mean to them. And I mean, it is possible. I've had a few trolls here and there on LinkedIn, but it's definitely the exception. So I have a YouTube channel where I've gotten pretty good traction, totally unrelated to B2B marketing. And it is insane, the comments that I get on there. Like, the people are mean and like not everybody. Some people are super nice there too. But I would say, you kind of get a lot of people who will come out of the woodwork and be absolutely mean. But LinkedIn is a much safer place to practice creating content than any other channel. So if you're used to being on other channels and you see the nasty comments and you're afraid that that's going to be your experience on LinkedIn, it won't. And if you do get a negative comment, just ignore them and move on with your life, because most people are actually really helpful in here. And especially the people who are active on the platform, they're in a similar spot, right? They want to grow their personal brand. They want to grow their business. They want to, and this is tied to you, right? It's not an anonymous platform where you're going to get a ton of trolls, right? So don't be afraid of that. Just create your first post, put it out there. And if you don't cringe a little bit when you look back in a year from now, then you probably haven't been growing enough anyway, right? So you're going to cringe in a year anyway, so you might as well just put it out there. See how it goes.
We've all been there.
And yeah, I've now landed three jobs that have all been successively better, higher paying, more career opportunity through LinkedIn myself, including my first marketing job where it wasn't me working as a freelancer, as an actual real marketing job that I landed through LinkedIn. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise on growing a personal brand and making those career transitions. I really learned a lot, and I know that people listening in will get a lot out of our conversation as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you next time.